Ever since that box of iPhones washed onto the shores of North Sentinel Island, I am officially the last person on Earth to learn about Lily Orchard. I'm fortunate enough to have learned about her through different reaction streams, so my takeaway is that she's kind of dumb about media, but reasonably good looking if you can overlook the anger issues. And if you're thinking, hey man, I'm geared up to hear you review her webcomic, I don't need to hear how you'd rate this 6. Well, I wish I could apply Death of the Author to this comic, because the thing is, I couldn't stop wondering what she really thinks while I was reading Poke Madhouse. And if it's been a minute since you read this webcomic, it's the one about Lily's self-insert OC and her Gardevoir. It was made by Lily Orchard in collaboration with her gal pal Michaela Turkelson. The main cast of the comic includes Lily, her Gardevoir, Lily's girlfriend Michaela, Gardevoir's girlfriend Butterfree, Lily's Miss Magius, Mara, a shiny Gardevoir who eventually starts dating Lily's Gardevoir, and Bonnie, a human Gardevoir hybrid who's the love child of Gardevoir and Lily. Every character can be broadly summarized as either an anger management dropout or a sentient ball of sunshine, with Bonnie mostly being a sunshine beam, but watch out, she bites. The vibe swings between a slice of life comic and a more serious interpersonal drama, but in a way that felt very natural. Now, before I start digging in too hard, I do want to give my nods of acknowledgement for what this comic did right. The first of which is that the tone shifts felt very natural. One post, they're going over the deep ethical implications of interspecies romance. The next post is Butterfree being an adorable goofball. Felt very organic, probably because this comic is an Ask blog. That's what most Tumblr blogs are. You reblog an essay on Marxism, followed by a funny cat gif, and nobody's demanding narrative cohesion. This was also very easy to read. I know that sounds like a non-compliment, but there's a lot of indie comics that are very text-heavy and unpleasant to look at. So reading them is an act of endurance where I'm powering through on sheer spite because the author is one of my personal lol cows. There wasn't that sense of, well, time to eat my vegetables, with Poke Madhouse. I could imagine a worse version of this comic starting out with an expo dump about how, in this world, Gardevoirs are an endangered species. Information is dispelled at a very natural and somewhat unassuming pace, which is impressive, given the depth and the scope of this story's world building. There's nothing breathtaking about the art, but I could follow the story. I always knew who was talking, and I was never confused by the panel layouts. Considering how many professional comics don't clear this bar for me, I have to applaud it for that. I also don't want to dog on the art too hard, like, sure, it's kind of rough, but I could tell this artist is having fun with it. The characters are all super adorable, which, again, something a lot of indie comics fumble on. If you're wondering why I haven't shown any examples of the art yet, well, IRL Orchard's latest character arc is striking down channels for copyright infringement. I know reviewing a comic would fall under fair use, but I think it'd be pretty funny if I got jostled around over this video when I've put the gun down. Everyone's being cool. I just want to talk. What's she gonna get mad at? The fact I called her a 6? Hey, I'm willing to bump her up to a 7 when she's not huffing and puffing about how everyone around her is wrong. Anyway, back to my point about Death of the Author. This comic mostly has the vibe of a rom-com where the main two have a will they or won't they back and forth. And when you watch rom-coms, you're not wondering if they'll hook up. That's a given in the genre. Rom-coms are a fantasy world where love always wins. So I was pretty confused, since Lily and Gardevoir seem so romantic with each other, but they always keep thinking of new ways to deny that anything romantic is happening. And if this was written by anyone else, I think, aw you. You're just joshing your readers and prolonging the inevitable. I know these two crazy kids are gonna make it. But this is Lily Orchard. She doesn't seem like the type to coolly shrug off strangers who misinterpret her work. I can imagine after every update where Comic Lily insists, I do not want Gardevoir smoochies, IRL Orchard would then tab over to her personal blog and snark about how maybe now these knucklehead readers will get the message. That's just speculation, by the way. I didn't actually see her do that. Her Tumblr and this actual comic are down at the moment. No idea what's going on there. Maybe the story's going to be rebooted so there's more no homo moments so people can get on board with La Maestra's vision a little bit sooner. Because it clicked for me that Comic Lily and Gardevoir are definitely never going to hook up once they met an alternate universe version of Lily and Gardevoir. In that universe, Lily and Gardevoir are dating, but only because that universe's Gardevoir brainwashed Lily. When that happened, I had to step back like, oh shit, you were serious when you kept saying they're never getting together. Oh, okay, alright. This isn't a rom-com teasing out the will they or won't they for fun. You actually are making a rom-com where they definitely won't. Everything they do in universe implies that they will. So that's why I can't stop thinking about the person writing this comic. This is such a specific niche that I have to wonder why this is what she chose to write about, and more importantly, why that is the way she chose to write it. I think the intent is that this story's supposed to be about a crazy found family. But since Lily's girlfriend Michaela gets such little screen time, they outright forget that Butterfree is dating Gardevoir. The story turns into an endless loop of Lily and Gardevoir getting super duper close, but then whipping around with a middle finger and a sassy, don't get the wrong idea, creep. I don't know if cognitive dissonance is the correct phrase here, But the suspected authorial intent and what we get on the page are two very different things. Like, you need to get an alternate universe version of Lily and Gardevoir to cross the multiverse and demonstrate that they would be bad news as a couple. I would have gotten that point sooner if OG Universe Lily and Gardevoir were a little less romantic with each other, or if Lily entered GF had more couples moments. The comic does tell you that human and Pokemon relationships are equal to bestiality, but I don't believe you. Or at least, I don't believe you can apply that 100% of the time. We see that Pokemon can be sold and treated like pets, and going into Pokeball is equated to solitary confinement, which is something a Pokemon's trainer can inflict as an unwilling punishment to their Pokemon. Lily uses this as a threat to her Miss Magius to keep her in line. But this is a world where Pokemon are able to communicate in human language and seem to possess a human level of intellect. Sure, there's Michaela Salazzle, who acts like a cat, so if you say that's bestiality, alright, I won't fight you there. Butterfree acts a little childish, but I don't know, maybe she's actually a 33-year-old girl boss executive who acts like this at home as her way to unwind. By the way, TV Tropes says that Butterfree and Gardevoir romance was dropped because IRL Orchard realized it was kind of yucky to have someone so childish dating the take-no-shit Gardevoir. I personally never got the ick from this pairing. I thought it was meant to parallel Lily and Michaela's relationship. Please refer to the alignment chart. But since these two are Pokemon, there's an interesting twist with their type alignments. Butterfree is a bug type, which gives her a type advantage over the psychic type Gardevoir. So although Butterfree is the quote-unquote cute one, she's secretly stronger than Gardevoir, or can compensate for her weakness. Either interpretation works. But the breakup is never explained in the comic, their relationship is just kind of dropped. When Gardevoir eventually gets a girlfriend, Mara, the new GF, had wrongly assumed she was adapted into the polycule of Gardevoir, Lily, and Michaela. Zero mention of Butterfree. Anyway, Comic Lily makes the point that it is her moral responsibility to shut down any advances from Gardevoir, because if they started dating, it would cross all sorts of ethical boundaries. And I'm just like, okay, but why though? This metaphor is going to be a stretch, but hear me out. This human Pokemon morality reminded me of the different biblical laws related to dietary restrictions. Say you're a sheep farmer living in Bible times, and you go to Walmart to buy a can of clam chowder. Suddenly, you run into Big M for Bible studies class. He leans in and says, "Didn't you hear? The boss upstairs said shellfish is off the menu." And you're not sure what's the deal here, but hey, you trust he's telling the truth, you're not going to argue, you put the can back. Fortunately, since you are living in Bible times, that means you're gifted with a superhuman lifespan. So you live long enough to learn different etiological theories on biblical dietary restrictions. The most common theory is health and hygiene concerns. Shellfish spoils quickly in the desert, or, say if one guy took a swig of clam juice and had a gnarly allergic reaction and no one knew what the fuck was going on, it's easier to just across the board say that we're not going to eat it. Nowadays, we could test for allergies and have more ways to safely store food, but there's still people following faith-based diets. Generally speaking, this is because it gives every meal a greater spiritual connection, so there's always going to be a bigger emotional and philosophical reason why these rules are being followed. But society has changed since the inception of these dietary restrictions. It's a little easier nowadays to learn about non-theological reasons for or against these dietary restrictions. And that's not to say there were no dissident opinions back in the day or that Google made us all into level 99 empaths. My point in giving this truncated summary of an entire field of religious culinary anthropology is to say that Poke Madhouse makes me feel like that sheep farmer standing in Walmart's clam chowder aisle just today getting the news that we're moving on from shellfish. I put the can of soup down and it's like, whatever you say, buddy, I trust you're not yanking my chain, and that's it, discussion over. And everyone in Poke Madhouse is operating with this mentality. They're all thinking, we're not even going to entertain this idea of Poke-human relationships because it's illegal. And I'm here as the reader or as the sheep herder at a healthy 6,000 years old with the luxury of hindsight who can go, well, maybe, perhaps, possibly. There's also a few practical reasons why we shouldn't be chowing down on shellfish. So I look at Poke Madhouse and I wonder, what are the practical reasons why humans and Pokemon cannot legally be in a relationship? I don't want to hear that it's gross or immoral. I want to know if 1 out of every 10,000 trainers has an allergic reaction when they switcheroo their Gardevoir, and there's no way to test for that, so it's just easier to wholesale ban the practice. My bigger problem here is that there is a fully sentient species that are being treated as second-class citizens. If your argument is that your Pokemon can't consent because they are dependent on you, I have to ask, why is that? When clearly, most of the ones we meet seem capable of taking care of themselves. I'm wondering why Pokemon are kept as dependents. Is this to make their lives easier, or is it because Gardevoir legally couldn't get a job or a home loan without a human approval? While in the process of making this video, I was fortunate enough to go on a podcast with that one Lucario fan and ask about the general vibe of Pokemon fan comics. Despite being into Pokemon, I only got into the fandom side of it after I played Legends Arceus, and if your fan comic doesn't have follow, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read it. So I was able to ask, like, okay, what's the deal here? Are all Pokemon fan comics applying these creepypasta grimdark headcanons to their world? And apparently that is mostly true. It's a genre where bad shit is constantly happening. Lucario offered the perspective of if someone's surrounded by this type of media, it makes sense that's why they want to make it. So if you read a bunch of edgy Pokemon comics and you think, I want to make a Pokemon comic, then what you spit out will be roughly the same size and shape. I think that's one piece of the puzzle, but I'm still not totally satiated. I left the conversation even more confused about IRL Orchard when I learned she's often critical of media for not addressing their in-universe political issues. Poke Madhouse hints at the issue of Pokemon personhood, but it remains mostly in the background and is never fully explored. The bigger ethical issues the story wants to address is interspecies relationship status. This universe is building its own laws and mores separate from any canon or even fan portrayals of Pokemon, so I'm not looking at the typical canon explanations for why Pokemon would want a trainer. Which we never get any of in this story, by the way. We get a flashback to when Lily received her Gardevoir back when Gardevoir was a Ralts, at what seems to be a pet store. Her mom was able to buy the Ralts by being a pushy Karen and demanding she get rung up, despite the cashier trying to tell Mama Orchard that Ralts isn't a pet, she's an endangered species. So if endangered Pokemon can be bought from the pet store as long as you have a pushy enough attitude, that sets a certain precinct, because I'm guessing things aren't much better for the non-endangered Pokemon. I'm gonna go back to that scene where Lily was threatening Miss Magios with putting her in the Pokeball for 5 years. I don't think Lily was being hyperbolic here. This seems to be a real deal punishment that could be inflicted onto Pokemon. I'd also like to bring up the Kala arc. Kala is a baby Ralts that Lily temporarily adopts until she's eventually adopted by Sam, a younger girl who likes playing with the Ralts. And when Kala the Ralts gets adopted, either Lily or Michaela, can't remember which one, fixes up a Pokeball for Kala. They tell Sam that they're only doing this because Pokemon legally need to have a Pokeball to be assigned to a trainer, and they make the point to her that she should try to avoid putting Ralts in the Pokeball. So let me lay out my train of thought. 1. Pokeballs are legally imposed on all Pokemon with a trainer. 2. Pokemon do not like being in the Pokeball. 3. Staying in a Pokeball can be imposed on Pokemon by their trainer for any reason, for any amount of time. And 4. This is completely normalized in their society, to the point where the most we could do is try to encourage people on an individual basis to be better, but any widespread societal change seems to be unmentioned in this story. Which brings me to my conclusion. I believe Pokemon are kept in subservience because humans have this technological advantage, therefore making a Pokemon uprising or rebellion difficult, if not impossible. So the crux of the comic is that Gardevoir and Lily cannot legally be in a relationship, because Gardevoir is a dependent of Lily, so that gets into some unsavory power social dynamics if Lily were to reciprocate Gardevoir's feelings. And yes, BT dubs, Gardevoir does eventually admit that she has feelings for Lily, but Lily does make it clear that even if the Pokemon is consenting, it's the human's legal and moral responsibility to shut that shit down. And Lily does see Gardevoir as a friend or a sister. Even without these legal restrictions, Gardevoir would still get friend-zoned. I'd also like to note that I can understand the found family message that they're going for here, even if the execution ultimately gives a mixed message. I'm on board with the general concept of a friend who's like a sibling, but you're never gonna date. My issue here is the sibling in question doesn't seem to be granted the same legal and personal freedoms as her human counterpart. So instead of walking away from this like, hey, Lily, good on you for being the bigger person and not giving in to Gardevoir smoochies, it's a little more horrifying to think that this relationship imbalance exists in the first place, and even more so that it appears to be legally supported in their fantasy world, and, most importantly, no one is working to dismantle it or address it for how bad it actually is. Which, again, brings me back to my birth of the author speculation. If someone has Gardevoir as their favorite Pokemon, but they're not into the Waifumon angle, and just legitimately thinks that they're neat, this is a very strange way to get that point across. That is, this is a romance story where everyone's shipping you with Gardevoir and you're very close, but not romantic, and even Gardevoir has some more than friends feelings for you. But even here, you firmly say it's not going to happen. I guess that's one way to put your foot down and make it known you're into Gardevoir for aesthetic or emotional reasons and not horny reasons. But I have some trouble understanding this POV since this is still planting the idea that Gardevoir is a waifu at every turn. I suppose that is part of the ethos of Gardevoir, that she has this reputation as a waifu Pokemon. But to that I say, who cares? It reeks of insecurity of being overly concerned what other people think. And look, I've definitely swung too hard in the other direction to the point where I'm an IRL Nozaki-kun. There is a point in this comic where Gardevoir and Lily temporarily sever their psychic connection. Typically, the two are able to coexist in each other's minds, hold telepathic conversations, even see each other's dreams. And when that bond is temporarily cut, Lily is absolutely distraught because now the inside of her mind is so quiet. She's feeling this severe isolation. I understand if this mentality is all that she's ever known, it would be distressing to suddenly have that shift. I get that. But okay, I gotta be real. I was laughing the whole time at this. I'm sorry. I was laughing the whole time at this. This is the kind of nightmare scenario you'd only write if you're very terminally online. Stories trading being alone with your thoughts as if it's this terrifying ordeal. Like, come on, buddy. Can you not log out of Twitter for 10 minutes and just vibe and hang? And anyway, if you want to make the point that you don't vibe with the waifu mon, you're kind of doing a shitty job because you keep reminding me of this concept at every turn. If you really think poke waifuism is cringe, you wouldn't mention it. You just drop it. You just make it slice of life about you and your Gardevoir, not make such a big goddamn deal about it. And there is a comic that does exactly that. I would like to turn everyone's attention to a comic that did this concept better. Suripa o Hirota no Deska, or I Picked Up a Hypno by Chupakabu R. It's about a young adult woman who's a little tomboyish, finding a depressed, lonely Hypno and deciding to take him in. It's a very cute slice of life story, and while it's unfortunately only 3 chapters, the artist has continued to draw their OCs in different adorable scenarios. One of my favorites is a sequence where the two try to play the Pocky game, but Hypno's Snoop gets in the way. This artist treats the two as very wholesome, but in Chapter 1 they do address the elephant in the room. That is, Hypno is the Hypnosis Pokemon, and a lot of secondary works with Hypno usually have a non-con element. Now since I'm a taper, I see Hypnos as part of the squad. They're just silly little guys, and I don't really vibe with the ugly bastard angle. Another fun fact about tapers is that we're from an ancient era. We're often referred to as living fossils. One interesting evolutionary holdover is that tapers are lacking the part of the brain that feels cringe or the capacity to kink shame. So if you're into that shit, good news. I am legitimately too stupid to care. Draw it to your heart's content. So in Suripa o Hirota no Deska, when our human protagonist first meets Hypno, she thinks back to the Pokédex entry and gets a bit skeeved out thinking of their hypnosis powers. But wow, does this Hypno look pathetic, so she pushes aside that initial ick feeling and invites Hypno to her apartment. Hypno's a bit nervous but polite when he arrives, and after being offered a drink by the human, he suddenly hypnotizes her asleep. But he doesn't do anything bad, he just safely tucks her into bed with a smile. We learn in Chapter 2 that the human had told Hypno about her insomnia issues, so this seemed to be Hypno's way of saying thank you. The rest of Chapter 2 is a more relaxed domestic hangout story. I won't spoil Chapter 3 on the off chance you do read this, and I'm keeping this all vague since it's so short and better experience firsthand. So other than that initial fake out where you think Hypno might do something skeevy, this comic never brings it up again, in either the comic or any of the supplementary drawings. And they definitely have a deeper connection with Hypno. I peeped on their Twitter and they have a bunch of photos of a small Hypno plush that they bring with them everywhere, which is something I also do with my favorite character. I want to do a little thought experiment. I don't want to just point to this comic as this is Poke Madhouse but good. Instead, I want to apply Poke Madhouse's logic to this comic and tell you how much it would absolutely ruin the straightforward story of a Hypno and a tomboy chillin'. Because what if after that initial hypnosis fake-out scene in Chapter 1, they kept doing it? What if instead of just letting the characters hang out, the tomboy protag would continuously turn to the camera with, well, some Hypnos will use their powers to non-con the innocent, but not my Hypno. Mine is one of the good ones. And the story would turn into this endless loop of talking about how there's all these bad Hypnos just slightly off screen where we can't see them, all while hyping up that this Hypno is pure and ethical and can do no wrong. That's the attitude that keeps coming up in Poke Madhouse. I'm reminded of the F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, "You don't write because you want to say something, you write because you have something to say." I don't know what Lily Orchard is trying to do with this story, other than posturing her self-insert as the moral compass of the world, where we're expected to clap and applaud at her rejection of Gardevoir smoochies, yet completely ignore the structural imbalances that made Gardevoir a subservient species to begin with. I don't know if the issue of Pokemon waifuism legitimately bothers her so much that it inspired this comic, or if there's some other real-world outgroup she's fighting against and it got lost in the metaphor. Art is never a one-to-one with real life, and I'm not too big on using art to psychoanalyze strangers. But the story is almost subversive. And I know that's going to sound pretty rich that, the webcomic starring a polyamorous lesbian trans woman isn't subversive enough for my taste, but alright, hear me out. Everything about these identities is a non-issue in this story. I understand that escapist angle of writing a fantasy world where your intersecting queer identities are totally normalized and accepted as part of life. That's totally cool, right? The problem here is that in this world, while the real-life queer identities are totally groovy, we still have a queer identity. That is Pokephilia, that is disavowed at every possible turn. And we're disavowing it primarily because it's illegal. I brought up the issue of Pokemon personhood, feeling that if this story wanted to address morality, this is the bigger issue going on in their world. And while I do think this is true, I can also empathize with why it does stay unaddressed. This is a completely separate branch of thinking, and if the spark of inspiration for this story is, here's my self-insert and this is her Gardevoir, it does make sense why this didn't turn into the Pokemon Liberation Manifesto. Despite all my gripings, I can't forgive the story for that. This comic's eagerness to follow the in universe rules is why we see the cracks. If the story did end with Lily and Gardevoir becoming a couple, then it would become a heartwarming love conquers all story, and I would feel a little more okay with Pokemon personhood going unaddressed. Because in that case, the primary struggle is fighting against what society tells them is wrong, so they can follow their heart and be happy. Instead, they're not fighting against anything. The overarching ideological villain is the idea that they're breaking the rules, and feeling incredibly angry that they are perceived as deviant when they in fact are not. Now, I've accepted that Lily and Gardevoir will never be a couple. I'm not going to force it. But it must be nice having a best friend who shares your kink for bootlicking.